Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. I don't know how many questions I'll get through this week. I started playing a game that came out on Friday, Ring Fit Adventure. It's been probably since I was 23 or 24 since I had a good workout. And so, taking the opportunity of an RPG releasing in the form of a fitness application, I decided to give it a shot, and we've been streaming it the last several days. And as such, I'm pretty tired, getting back into the rhythm of things after however many years. Home workouts were really always more my jam, high intensity stuff. I did Insanity, both of the versions of it, P90X, all that stuff, on top of moving on to my own stuff after the fact. It just feels good to be active again, be a little bit healthier. So I'm also exhausted. It'll take my body a little while to get adjusted to all that. So lots of water and a little bit of a headache. I could probably use a nap after this. But wanted to give you guys a heads up. I don't know if anyone wants to see that stuff on YouTube. I technically exported one to YouTube, but I didn't make it live because I was like, this is kind of just an unedited mess, more so than like a live stream cover of something would be. So I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with that yet, but we'll see. Now let's get into the questions, but before that, thank you to our patrons. I do have an announcement for our patrons. I was going to put it officially on the Patreon, but since this is public and the patrons and the non-patrons can see it too, YouTube monetization has actually been getting a little bit better. They added a system where it can actually self-rate our videos. So we can, rate it for things like light profanity or violence or whatever. And so as long as we're reporting it responsibly, unless there's something that's way out of whack with it, either being like a copyright or something that is manually reviewed and seen to be, inaccurate based on what our self-rating is, demonetization just hasn't been happening much anymore. I like to say those things because the Patreon has pretty much exclusively existed, and all the people whose names have been scrolling through the list, that has pretty much exclusively existed just as a supporting system for YouTube. So whenever there's an update on that kind of stuff, I'd like to be fair to the people who watch the channel, support the channel, and let them know, because it's fair to them. So they, I get apology emails about not being able to support it. It's optional. It's not there as anything too serious. It's just there if you enjoy the YouTube content and you'd like some additional support. We also got to thank our patrons of darkness, of course, Khuja on Jenova and Kurenai Oni, who, me logging into Ring Fit Adventure, I noticed I had a friend request from both of them. And so I made sure to accept that because I haven't looked at my friend request on the Switch in a very, very long time. So thank you to our patrons of darkness. Thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon. And with that, let's get to the questions. All right, here's a really short one. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, just curious, how did you and Sly meet? It's not anything too spectacular. Funny thing, I was coming into the very first fan festival in North America a little bit later than most people. As such, there was already a 9-hour line waiting for people's badges, and my girlfriend had gotten there earlier than me and was standing in that line. God bless her soul. And she met Sly in the line and introduced the two of us. So it was complete happenstance that she ended up standing next to somebody as cool as Sly in the line, and that it became this friendship that's lasted for all these years. It's too bad that we mostly only get to speak once or twice a week, because whenever Sly and I have the opportunity to hang out at a convention, we tend to spend a lot of time. We go out to food together. We spend a lot of time catching up and stuff like that. And it's been a great friendship that's led to a lot of hilarious moments on State of the Realm and through other means and avenues and stream interactions and all that stuff. So yeah, really, really simple story. It's thanks to my girlfriend that we ended up meeting, essentially. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello to you too, by the way. Referencing classic remastered games from the previous week, right there with you on Gomen. Yeah, a lot of people messaged me about that or left comments on the previous video. Or on this video, because I saw a bunch of comments popping up in my email and stuff. Jet Set Radio Future. I haven't even thought about that game in a while. Yeah, solid game though. Now on to my question. Phantasy Star Online 2 is coming to the Xbox One and maybe PS4 locally to the US in 2020. While I'm excited for this and we'll certainly pick it up, what are your thoughts on it coming in so late to an older game, even though locally those of us in the US are all starting from scratch on progression, or would you prefer a brand new release globally like a PSO3, or both within a year of each other? I don't know about that last part, because I'm not particularly attached to the Phantasy Star franchise. It was one of my favorite demos and games that I played way back when I was a kid, but that was the original PSO. As for the timing of PSO Online 2, or PSO Online, DC Comics, Phantasy Star Online 2, it's definitely too late. It's not that I don't think it'll do okay here in the US. I just feel like everyone who actually had an interest in it, they downloaded an English patch and are playing it in another region already. They've experienced it. They know what they're in for, and they'll play it. They'll play it on the US version too. but I don't know about its staying power. It's something that's fun to log in and mix things up a little bit. But depending on what systems make it over in their entirety, certain things in that game are not as friendly to players in the West, or not as well received to players in the West as they are to people who, to the culture of the East. There's, again, I don't want to speak too much because I'm not super knowledgeable, but I've had a lot of people like try to break down the I guess more loot box centric progression and comparing that versus like daily progression, which can make it so you can largely ignore that as long as you're willing to commit the number of days to do it. But again, I can't speak on it too exactly. So I'm kind of just projecting conjecture to those of you who are watching, because I'm sure that a discussion will spring from it in the comment section of this video. But I should definitely not be the one to try to talk about it. I just think it's too late. And it's on Xbox of all things. Like, not that there hasn't been like MMOs and single player RPGs on Xbox in the last few years. Like, most of them release on all the platforms. But I feel like most people who are purchasing a console for RPGs either have a PC, a PS4, or a Switch. And they didn't go out of their way to get the Xbox unless there were other titles they wanted on the Xbox for some reason. So, yeah, it's maybe when it hits PS4. It'll be a little bit better if it ever hits PS4, if it's not a permanent exclusivity and is a timed exclusivity. But I'm not optimistic. It'll be fun. I'll play it. I definitely will. But it's not going to be something that has too much longevity for me. Next one, and this one's very long. I guess to make up for the first one. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Happy. I hope this finds you well and you're doing all right. I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. First time question here. What do you think SC could do for Red Mage outside of a potency buff? Well, we did learn Red Mage is getting a potency buff. They are adjusting acceleration to make it so that it has 3 charges, or it works for 3 spell casts. So that way you can, I guess, ease into your opener or time your opener a lot better with raid buffs and whatnot. So that's a good change in exchange for extending the cooldown. I'm not a Red Mage expert, so take everything I say here with a grain of salt. Being the difference between Red Mage and Black Mage, the difference between their DPS disparity is substantial. Yes, and that's why I agreed that a potency buff was probably the biggest thing. I will say I don't really like Embolden. It's there, I guess. The only concern with if it was, all damage is that, Black Mage benefits from having a Red Mage in the group, and you worry about double caster, but some groups are already running double Black Mage anyway, so what does that end up really mattering, I suppose? I don't know. For me, it's not so much about changing the gameplay style. It really is just about straight potency buffs. That's like the number one thing I think of, and then maybe a change to Embolden, and I guess the acceleration change that they've suggested. I'm sure someone who plays Red Mage could provide a great deal more insight on something like this, but all I know is a 50 percentile Black Mage should not be equal to or above a 90 to 95 percentile Red Mage. That I feel like that's too substantial of a gap. Red Mage should probably have a close to 800 to 1,000 DPS lead on average at any percentile, but not like 2,500. I feel like it's too much, I feel. Next one, no hashtag on this one, but I saw it was a question, so I didn't want to scroll past it. Hey there, hello. Thoughts on catching up? How should new players get into Savage quickly? I feel like a tiny baby with my 450 weapon that I can't replace for 7 weeks. Well, lucky for you, you're asking this question, approximately a week before patch 5.1, in which case there'll be a ton of catch-up tools for you. The new EX trial will be a source of a 465 weapon, most likely, if they follow trend as they have in the past. 460 armor coming from the 24-man, upgrade materials to your tombstone armor and accessories to get them from 460 to 470. Those will come from the 24-man weekly, as well as from the hunt if you're willing to grind those out or go to the A rank trains or participate in spawning S ranks or any of that stuff. All that stuff's going to help you a lot. If they keep a system they introduced in Stormblood, there should be a way to increase crafted weapons and armor from item level 450 up to 460 as well, although it would lose the ability to do the pentameld. So there's going to be a bunch of things. I'd say the bigger trick is the specific question was getting into Savage. And getting into Savage is rough no matter what. If you're not there right from the beginning of a raid tier, the grind is definitely a lot slower because your selection of fresh prog groups or groups that are willing to accept someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, it goes down over time. And it becomes easier to try and, go and play with friends than it is to try and just go to random party finders. But that's pretty much what the grind is. You establish your efficiency in the raids, you do your learning and establish your efficiency through the party finder. And once you have adequate experience, depending on your skill level, you can then more easily find party finders, clear them when they're fresh, earlier, so it's easier to find weekly clear groups, and more so find a static that maybe is a little bit more comfortable of a schedule than just going into the party finder and hoping for the best. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Hap, I hope all is going well. I really appreciate the video on your productivity last week. It's really made me critically evaluate what's going on in my own life. My question for the week is, well, thank you for the comment. I feel like it was fair to YouTube to make that video. YouTube has been a large portion of my career over the past several years, and being, leveling with you guys is always something that I think is important to do when I really need to. What was the most interesting announcement from Riot Games last week? I'm pretty hyped for all their announcements. I did make a video about that, although some of my wording is not so great in that video, which is whatever. Whenever I wing videos, that's pretty normal for me. For me, it was Project F, which was something they talked maybe 30 seconds about at most. It looked to be a Marvel Heroes-esque, isometric action RPG online with friends, but they wouldn't tell us. Specifically, the lead of that project said they weren't going to talk genre until they were more prepared to talk about it. So it is a little ambiguous for me. The way they described it sounds like an MMO, but the way that it looks on screen looks a lot more just like a cooperative action RPG. So whatever it is, though, whether it's more Diablo style or it's like an MMO like Lost Ark, I'm going to be excited regardless. I'm just leaning towards it probably being the like a Marvel Heroes-esque action RPG. Next question, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Hap, hey ya. Mentor discussions seem to be getting out of hand here and all throughout the community. My question is, why do we really care so much? The benefits from the mentor system is an additional low-tone roulette with a few long-term goals of glamour bits and a rare mount. Helpful people don't need a crown to be helpful. Toxic people don't need a crown to be toxic. All those things seem to make the target one way or another. What do you think about renaming a mentor system to the veteran system, keeping the roulette and ditch the icons altogether? Also, long-time listener, first-time boaster, I have a first-time bonus of discussion coming to. You're lucky I don't sometimes read all the way to the end because I'm like, I've got the question in the first little bit. And then I had a bonus question. A crown has always been a subconscious symbol of authority. There will always be people who want to wear it for flex power and others who actively seek to knock the crown down. So we may never get rid of the mentor system. What do you think is a better icon replacement? So some good questions here. I actually, a lot of your initial question talking about it being a low-tone roulette with, long-term goals for glamour bits, rare mounts, I think that's the problem, is that's how we've quantified the mentor system. Final Fantasy XIV, while there are plenty of us who produce content on YouTube, Twitch, and various other platforms, Final Fantasy XIV has a grand issue of teaching new players what to do. Intuitively, in-game, yes, you could always tell someone, read your skills, ask other players, and that's great. I actually do appreciate that. That is what most people's recommendations are, is to do some research or speak to a friend or anything along those lines to get you more knowledgeable, because it gets people involved with the community. That being said, that is how a very small percentage of people approach games in general. Most people want to be able to open a game and intuitively play it, and as they interpret things, whether it be right or wrong, that shapes their experience. And the game should do its best to help you along the way. The problem is we have not had a system outside of the Hall of the Novice that's done anything to reinforce that idea. The closest thing we've ever had is the mentor system. So when it's so constantly affiliated with having such a bad reputation, whether it be players who abuse it for the crown, players who are incapable of giving proper advice, or whatever it might be, it kind of reflects negatively on the ability to teach new players within the game itself. So for me, that's the thing. As you said, someone doesn't need a crown to be helpful. And I think that's the biggest problem with the mentor system, is it is trying to incentivize you to help people. And that just is attracting not the crowd of people that should be doing things for people in the first place. So I'm okay with renaming it, keeping the roulette, ditching icons. I'm cool. I just wish there was some means of quality control in there, or ways for people to lose the crown if they aren't actually being mentors or aren't actually being helpful. It's such a micromanaged system that doing it properly would be an immense task that I don't think Square Enix is really up to. As for the bonus, if I could change the icon, it'd be to, you know what, this isn't even my idea. I've liked people's recommendations of it being a watering can, because that's not anything that shows any sort of major authority, but it is very representative of, watering a sapling, and new players are saplings, essentially. So I like the community's idea of making it a watering can. Next question, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing? Tired, but otherwise, I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. As a player who started in Stormblood, I'm finally getting around to trying older content that I wasn't around for, such as Alexander and Coil. I've been noticing these fights are a lot more unorthodox and experimental compared to Omega and Eden, which feel like straight boss fights and have more intense mechanics than main scenario trials, which I have no problem with. Curious, did SE ever go into what caused the design choice? Was it something that players requested? Was it easier to balance jobs around these newer fights? Or did this just happen and Square Enix never said anything? So I think we don't really see more of a pattern to that stuff until you get to Creator. I feel like the first 5 raid tiers, 6 if you include I guess more if you include the normals and the savages, like second Coil Savage, were really shaped by I guess player feedback on a patch-to-patch basis. They said the first raid tier, first Coil, was designed in such a way that it was brand new MMO. They didn't really have an entire idea, and they wanted to ease people in who were still figuring out how the game worked. Second Coil, they bumped up all of the mechanics because now they needed to like figure out how to come up with more creative ideas. They needed to get all their developers kind of being a little, more out there with what they tried to do. And it had some pros, some cons, a lot of disjointed mechanics, phases, having awkward timing pushes, but still made for some memorable fights that people still talk about to this day. And Final Coil kind of consolidated all of those for that expansion, came up with sort of a nice middle ground where there was some intense DPS checks, some intense heal checks, especially in the earlier weeks, but more lenient DPS checks, and also that being a result of people now having had over a year to really learn how the game was supposed to function. So, and then going into Second Coil, even going into Second Coil, people started to ask for more serious challenges. So they tried out Second Coil Savage, they got some feedback from that. People enjoyed the level of the challenge, the people who actually did it, but didn't enjoy the reward structure. So they decided to make a normal and a Savage for the standard difficulty, and then that's when Gordius almost single-handedly wiped out Final Fantasy XIV off the face of the earth for the second time, because Gordius was an outright disaster, especially in regards to the sheer lack of anything else to do at that point in the game. So on top of 3.1 being a bit of a problem, and then 3.2 having Midas, which while it was not as gut-wrenchingly annoying as most of the fights in Gordius were, it was still a major wall that to this day is probably the least cleared raid tier. Including people doing it unsynced, it's probably the least cleared raid tier of all time because it was flashy, it was mechanically intense, but a lot of people just couldn't keep up with it, especially because Heaven's Word's job mechanics were much more, there was a much higher skill ceiling back then because the number of buttons and the intricacies of the job and the problems jobs had were way more profound since they hadn't really nailed that down yet either. Then you come to Creator. Biggest change going into Creator was that you could, every time you wiped, your cooldowns all reset. Up until the point of Midas, that was not a thing. So now with Creator, that was a thing, and it made progression go way, way faster. On top of that, they toned down a little bit of things from Gordius, a little bit from Midas. They toned down DPS checks, they toned down mechanic checks, and gave people a nice middle ground so that rating was once again approachable, like it was in Coil, but had still learned the lessons that they had learned throughout Coil and Gordius and Midas. So they have gone, as raid tiers have come out, kind of into the decisions, but since Creator, they haven't bothered talking about it much, other than the occasional mention of, people giving them feedback about door bosses and trash and whatnot, and what's led to kind of these direct trials that we have now in Stormblood and Shadowbringers. So hopefully that was an elaborate enough answer, and hopefully it was as accurate as possible. I'm fairly confident that that was as accurate as I could have possibly made it, and yeah, thanks for the question. All right, next one. Question. Hey there, Haps. Hope you had a good weekend. I'm tired, but otherwise I'm doing all right. As a disclaimer, this question comes from someone who up until recently had a very casual perspective on raiding. I just want thoughts from someone with more experience. Cool. Last expansion I got into raiding was some players who came over to 14 from some other MMOs. WoW, ESO, etc. It became common for them to moan about 14's spaghetti code and awful snapshotting. 14 is the only MMO I've ever played, and I've played on and off since 2.0, so I feel pretty well adjusted to it. My question is basically, is 14 really that inferior in terms of to its peers in terms of snapshotting character locations for mechanics? There's a really poor excuse for not showing up. So this is a common problem that comes from other people who have played other MMOs in recent years, and that's because in a lot of MMOs, the dodge of a mechanic comes with the animation of the attack. And in Final Fantasy XIV, it does not. When the cast bar is done, you are snapped and loaded. It also varies, of course, with latency. People trying to dodge things at the very last second when their latency is in the hundreds, or you can have someone who, like me, who's on the West Coast, and I can dodge something at the very last second and it's clean every time just because I have low latency. So it's not so much that it's inferior in terms of snapshotting, it's just different. And considering there are almost no games that work like that, it comes off as frustrating when you are literally on the other side of the arena, but the animation was so long that because you were standing in it at the end of the cast, the animation took so long, you were basically a mile away from it when you died, is what causes a lot of people to have that issue. So no, yeah, again, I don't know that it's not really inferior, it's just very different, and it can be very jarring to people who have come over from MMOs that do not have that style of character of judging whether or not you were hit by something. Next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays, hashtag world first. I don't know about that, but we'll see. Beat my record from last week and made view number 1 and hopefully question number 1. Definitely not question number 1. No, I can reorder it. No, I'm not going to do that. So as usual, hey Habs, how you doing? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. On to the question for this week, and I'll keep it open-ended so we can get to know more about your gaming experiences. What has been the most frustrating game you have ever played? This is gonna this is gonna surprise some people, and it's not gonna surprise others. Lion King on the Super Nintendo. It's weird that I have that answer so ready. There are some close seconds and thirds from the Super Nintendo and N64 era. I didn't own a Sega, so the only Sega games I played were at a friend's house, such as like Jurassic Park, which is insanely frustrating as well. But definitely Lion King on the Super Nintendo. That game just melted my brain. As like a small child, I was not ready for that experience. Some other ones as I got older that came pretty close to being equally frustrating. Hexen, actually, a game I looking back actually loved. I played it a lot, but I got lost in that game so much, and I hated getting lost in that game as a kid. But what else? I guess if we want to get an MMO in that perspective, ESO and the original release ESO, I actually am much more okay with the game now. And WildStar, man, WildStar frustrated me, mostly because there was a lot of people pugging that. Yeah, there's a reason that game didn't make it. There's a few reasons that I can think of. But yeah, those are just three, but definitely Lion King right at the top. Next one, hi, Mr. Happy. First time asking, a long time viewer. Well, welcome, and thank you for the question. I'm interested in completing each of the role quests, but I've only played White Mage and don't plan on mastering any other classes. For this reason, I just want the simplest classes to play. Based on what we know about 5.1 changes, what do you think is the simplest to play in each category? Thanks for all the 5-star content. Thank you for watching it. So, mind you that it's physical DPS, magical DPS, tank, healer. So you've already taken care of healer, and I think White Mage was your best choice there. For tank's actually a tough choice. I'd probably avoid Gunbreaker and Dark Knight. They're not too complicated, but I'd say for me personally, Paladin is the easiest one to understand. You have that super long invulnerability of Hallowed. You have some very straightforward defensive cooldowns. You have some very straightforward offensive windows that are very easy to rotate between. So Paladin's my number one winner there. As for physical DPS, that's, I think Dancer is probably the easiest, but I'm sure it's still tough to really call that. I think Dancer is probably the easiest for the physical DPS to level them and not master them at all. You have great AoE to get through the dungeons from that level range, and there's not too many buttons. So yeah. And as for magical, I haven't leveled Red Mage yet. A lot of people always said Red Mage was boring, which probably translates to super easy. But since I haven't done 70 to 80 yet on Red Mage, Black Mage was pretty easy. But if you don't know how that job is working, it's probably a disaster. Okay, I'll give you this. Instead of leveling a caster, your easiest experience will probably be to level Scholar. You've already leveled a healer. You know that at least the basics of that. And by leveling Scholar, you'll get Summoner leveled as well. So that's an advice for anyone looking to do all the role quests. If you haven't done healer and caster, do Scholar. Quick Qs, you get healer and caster out of the way. So do that. I think that's probably your best bet. All right, next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hello. Paladin main here. I really enjoyed the insane level of utility and number of tools Paladin brings to the table. I leveled Gunbreaker and Dark Knight to 80 as well. I feel like they have a lot more fun with their attacks. I also feel way more vulnerable not having all the self-preservation tools that Paladin has, or at least lesser different versions of them. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the tanks and Shadowbringers, where you would rank them from best to worst, or if not, what you think each is the best at. Thanks for taking the time to read my question. I hope you coming back to I hope that coming back to creation on YouTube provides a fun and constructive creative outlet for you. Keep up the good work. You got it, and thank you. All the tanks are super close. It's mostly down to preference. I think most people would agree that Gunbreaker and Paladin are sitting at the top 2. And that Dark Knight and Warrior are not very far off, but are probably below the other 2. And again, I'm not speaking from, I guess, really my own opinion. It's just I'm taking information that's been given to me from people who do play them. But largely, they're so close that if you like one over the other, you're really okay to play any of them. So it's tough. I definitely prefer Paladin the most. I had the least fun leveling Warrior. I've been okay. I've actually had a little bit of fun leveling Dark Knight, more fun than I thought I would have. And Gunbreaker, I loved leveling. I just love the activity of it, and it actually has a really solid defensive rotation. You can go from a Heart of Stone into a Rampart into a Heart of Stone into and oh god, I can't remember the names of all the abilities. The 30% reduction. The name's escaping me right now. Into another Heart of Stone. Into an Arm's Length, into another Heart of Stone. It's I love the feeling of that on top of their actual offensive rotation. So that's it. I'll get the 1, 2, 3, 4 that I sort of gave you. That's gonna be my answer. Next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Happy, with 5.1 coming out in a few weeks, do you have any preparations recommended for players who have just joined the game come 5.0 and have not gone through a major content drop yet? Thanks. Well, thank you for joining Mondays with Mrhappy so quickly after the launch. And hello to you too. So here's the thing. So content launches are usually staggered, and that's deliberate so people log in for newer content while they're waiting for the next patch. There is, of course, still a lull period. You've no doubt experienced that by this point, depending on, I guess, what it is you're really trying to do with your online experience at this time. The biggest thing is that there is no reason to rush. Most people will prioritize one of the things, like if they want to do the new EX Primal, they'll prioritize that right off the bat, or EX Trial, I should say. If people want to do the 24-man, they'll prioritize that. It's literally just about picking the things that are most important to you that will be there on each individual patch and going forward with those. So for example, if you're not doing Ultimate when 5.1 rolls around, or 5.11 2 weeks later rolls around, you might find more interest going over to Ishgard and being a part of the restoration because that's new content for you. Maybe when 5.15 comes around, you have a choice. Do you want to try out the new PvP map, or do you want to get working on Blue Mage? Do you have your Blue Mage leveled right now, and are you even interested in it to some degree? If not, I totally understand. And if you are, maybe you need to do that to prepare in the time between 5.0 and 5.1 and 5.15. So it's just about setting priorities. Now that's pretty much how every content drop works. Is looking for the little things that you like and doing those first. Other than that, it's not really more complicated. Luckily, the game is very approachable. It's very easy to step into the game. It's very easy to step out of the game. Whether that's good or bad, well, that's up to every individual. Next question, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Happy, how you doing? You missed my question a few weeks ago. It's an issue that is still bothering me as a melee DPS main. Okie dokie. Limit breaks suck. That's a weird take. They are so weak compared to even last expansion, even worse when compared to Heavensward. Potency has continued to grow on jobs, and LB potency has stayed the same. My question is, has the 14 teams said anything that is being worked on? Do you have any idea how they can fix it beyond just potency buffs or removal? Just so you know, the potency of a limit break stays the same, but its scaling is actually collectively with the item level of the weapons on the entire party. That's why if you have 2 melees, it doesn't matter which one of them is stronger, it's still going to be the same potency, and it will scale up as people get more items level. This has been true in every expansion, and the first patch of Heavensward and the first patch of Stormblood, they looked just as weak as they do now. So there's really not much to say or do. They're an incredibly important portion of beating DPS checks, especially in the earlier weeks, or cheesing mechanics like we do in E4 Savage when we want to break both of the jails and not have to commit as much time or resources, or have to even think about running out of time to actually break one of those jails. So keep that in mind when we're talking about limit breaks. Also, I believe they buffed the ranged LB this expansion to match the caster LB, so there's no longer a DPS discrepancy at those ranks with those skills. Excuse me. Also, Rant, as a monk, I can either do 10 seconds of DPS or stun myself for 500,000 damage. I mean, it's better to be in the past expansion. Seems way more powerful. Like I said, yeah, you're right. That was a rank, so there wasn't a lot to take away. I think I know what I'm taking away here from here, but it's Monk's so easy and so strong right now. That's ridiculous. That's all I'll add to that. All right, we're about 30 minutes into this, so I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to see where I'm at, like, remaining question-wise, and then I'll determine if I just want to keep going, because I'm feeling a little bit better than I did at the start of the video. I've had time to relax, and the tiredness is no longer as severe. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, how you doing? I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Recently, new listener and first-time asker. Welcome. So here's a gift of senpai. Is that senpai? Not senpai? I have a feeling it's like an anime meme. I'm not like, Noticing me with the Dragon Sight Tether for a whole week in battle at me. Ayy. I have 3 questions, 2 about companions, 1 glamour. I'll keep it short as possible, good, because I'm probably not going to be a great source on any of these. What do you think about them implementing a chocobo dungeon, such as setting the roles as tank, DPS, healer, and watching them go throughout the dungeon support cheering? I don't really, I'm not a big fan of just watching other things do content for me. So I'm not a big fan of the idea of just giving them support by cheering. Like, it's very uninteractive. It's why it was a big disappointment with Chocobo training to me. It was basically, I don't know why they even put it in a trailer. It was an uninteractive 1-button press that I could do occasionally. So I just don't feel great about uninteractive content like that. 2 Moogle companions switch, dyed their fur. They already have weapons in King Mog. No. So they originally spoke about doing alternate companions, and they abandoned it because they realized companions are useless. They're used in like overworld. Some people throw them in while they're doing the main scenario to act as a healer, a tank, some extra deeps to kill mobs faster, but they're generally useless. They just kind of create problems at hunts with people not being able to load the hunt because there's too many chocobos and minions around. So you probably won't ever see an update to companions, and honestly, I kind of agree with it. Unless they're going to develop something more specific for it, I don't care if they add or, never touch it again. Lastly, what or whose glamour would you like to see from other games into 14? Any at all? I don't really care about glamour. I care more about aspects like the lore, the story, the boss fights, the variety of content, such as like treasure maps and hunts. Those things matter more to me. Sometimes I find an outfit and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks cool, but I don't like pursue it. It's like I have the same relation with glamour that I have with anime, going back to that. Or I watch anime. I've seen animes. Like, after school, I used to watch Yu Yu Hakusho and Dragon Ball Z even before I knew what anime was. And so I carry some of that into my adulthood. But I don't like go and check out what new animes are coming out. I don't like, oh, season 2 of this, season 3 of that, what's coming out this spring. I make a list of things I gotta watch. Like, it's like that with glamour. If I run into a cool piece, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Obviously I've picked things up. I've changed my appearance before, but I otherwise am indifferent to it. I don't pursue it, and I don't desire specific things. I support that other people desire those things. And I generally try to be like, yeah, whatever. That's glamour. That's good for them. Cool. I think I'm good to keep going. If I want to stop on a question, I'll just let you know at the start. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hello. Long-time viewer, first-time asker. Welcome. What are your thoughts on screens creating something like a non-combat or less combat-heavy based puzzle-solving dungeon? Like a large 20 to 30 room dungeon that has puzzles and challenges need to be solved to move on to the next room. Some could have solo versions, or others needing 4-person parties to complete escape room-style chambers, puzzles requiring people to stand on particular platforms, etc. I feel like adding endgame like this with rewards like mounts, minions, craft mats, emotes, glamour items would be a welcome addition. Maybe something similar to Treasure Map Dungeon with less RNG and more thinking puzzle solving. So this is something that pops up a lot when it comes to people commenting on dungeon design in general, because our dungeons are very straightforward. They're basically the same. They're basically the same skeleton with a different coat of paint. And so, people always come up with ideas about ways to make, branching paths and stuff. But we just happen to live in an era where people will always go the path of least resistance. And there are absolutely people who are not only desiring that. I myself love when creative ideas and stuff happens, but in an MMO setting, I need a good reason to do these kind of things. And yes, of course, mounts, minions, crafts, emotes, glams. I'm someone who does treasure maps almost exclusively for all the things you just listed. On top of the achievements that are related to it. But I have a small portion of people who watch me on a daily basis who want to participate in that content as well, or are capable of it because they're on the same data, they're on different data centers. So I'm never against ideas like this. I'm never against the idea of branching dungeons and puzzles and stuff. I don't think it's ever a bad idea if it's done well. That being said, I always have concerns over its health in the game. Because whenever there's an alternate path or something that sends you off to the side, there's going to be people who just don't want to participate. If you get a tank that wants nothing to do with that and just wants to go to the end, what are you going to do? You're going to be the person who runs down the other path and just pulls because you don't agree with the tank. It's like, or if the tank does want to do it and everyone else doesn't want to do it, it's just... we live in a time where it's really hard to get people to commit to running in anything but a straight line. And so I grow concerned for that in the future. But so I'm cool with the idea that you presented, but I'm very confident the community would have a hard time feeling like it was a justified addition to the game. Unless they make it something in the Gold Saucer like a gate, something that could be done in 4 or 5 minutes, approachable by individuals and not in parties. That might be more successful, but not something that is a primary piece of content for the game. I just think it would kind of fall to the wayside all too quickly. All right, I scrolled down after the last one. I'm like, oh my god, I'm nowhere close to being done. And as much as I'm not as tired as I was at the beginning, I'm still pretty tired. So I'm going to make this the last one. And I will say in the following week, so that way people can kind of get some re-asks in there. If people could stick to one question, I should probably just say this at the beginning of the next video and really expect it from 2 weeks. If they could stick to one question for like a week or two when I have like a lot of questions like this, or even if you see a lot of other questions already asked, I'd really appreciate it if we could try to, like, you know, if you have multiple questions, instead of trying to fit them all into one episode, you know, throw them out in multiple episodes, you know, that way we've got a little bit more variety. So this is I thought of that because this is a multi-part question. This will be the last one that I'm taking for this video, unfortunately. If you have a question, be sure to put it in the comment section of this video. And again, keep those things in mind that I just had. It would be better for me, and it would be better for other people, you know, that want to ask questions that I just wasn't able to get to this week. So hashtag Mrhappy Mondays, greetings, good sir. I got 2 topics for you, hopefully. Don't worry, I do the same thing with the same word all the time. I don't know why. Find it interesting. Is there a specific reason why 14 does not tell you the percentage of stats like tenacity, courage, determination? They've been asked about this a lot, because I agree that we should be able to see the percentage of stats. I believe the answer was that it was better to leave those things up to the community, because it created like discussion and yeah, I guess that it just created discussion amongst the community. I don't agree with that. Listen, it's so many games that have come before this have had that. I don't think in this day and age we need to manually calculate critical hit percentage and critical hit damage percentages and stuff like that. People just want to know the answer. They just want to be able to figure out exactly how their stats are improving their character and not leave it up to somebody on a Discord that's run it through an emulator or a calculator to tell them this is the approximate percentage after 1,000 emulated. You know, nobody wants that. So yeah, I agree with you, but that's, I believe, the reason they stated several years back, actually. Let's see, last time I checked, 14 gives you a pretty detailed tooltip what critical hits are and the stat does, but no percentage. Yeah. No, you're not missing anything. We're just as confused as you are after all of these years. What is your opinion on the implemented UI feature regarding shielding above 100%? I hate that it's over the HP bar. I've seen other people say it looks good. I'm like, no, I hate it. I hate that it covers my name. I don't know. The alternative is just put it on the same bar. But they both look ugly to me. And at the same time, I kind of just wish that the bar at the end would like push your health bar in more if the shield was bigger, and not like go back to the beginning and overlap. I don't know. They all kind of just don't look good to me, but I'm glad they're trying at the very least. I'd rather have the information and not have it look as pretty than not have the information, is at the end of the day. Yeah, it looks like a graphic glitch. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's supposed to be that way, but it is. Yeah, it's really, really weird. So yeah, I agree with you on pretty much both points here, but that's going to be the last question for this episode of Mondays with Mrhappy. Again, apologies if I did not get to your question this week. I went a little bit longer to try and catch a few more, but I can only go so long before I just can't keep up, and I'm scrolling down right now, I can catch literally about 9 more questions, and I don't want to keep going and try to commit to all of them. So if you had a question, didn't get asked, ask it in next week's episode. And again, try to keep it to 1. If you had a question this week that I didn't get to and it was more than 1, please keep that in mind. I may even just, no matter what, if people don't get to this message, I may just only take the first question for weeks in advance. I'm gonna have to start scrolling through and actually like coming up with a calculation, in which case those hashtags come in a lot more handy, because then I can just control F hashtag Mrhappy Mondays and find out exactly how many I have. And then, of course, there'll be a few stragglers throughout that. But anyway, thank you for watching. Again, thank you to our patrons and our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Cross, and Kurenai. Thank you to everyone tuning in. I will see you next week for the next episode of Mondays with Mrhappy, which will be coming a day before patch 5.1. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, take care.